Coming up next, a Christmas party occurs up at Wildbrook, plus the Knights arrive up at the John Hunter Hospital, and we take a look back at the year of sports, 2001. That's coming up here on NBN's Local Sports News. Good evening, my name's Conklin McLeod of NBN's Local Sports News. Tonight, a Christmas party up at Wildbrook. The Newcastle Knights have a visit to the John Hunter Children's Hospital. And we have a look at the local sporting flashbacks from the year 2001. But first tonight, a Christmas party has occurred right up at Wildbrook. It was right up at the youth centre. Because of that, it was just one of the best. And of course, where there was a lot of food, and also plenty of karaoke. It's a huge and marvellous one. And of course, it's occurred right up at Wildbrook's Youth Connections. As part of Youth Connections Christmas party. So how'd you ended up? So how'd you end up feeling, Sarah?
Oh look, this is a great day. I'm so proud of the participants, and I can't believe the talent that we have here. It's outstanding, Connor.
Tell us, so how's the party going?
Oh, I tell you what, it is fantastic, and Connor is a superstar singer.
Yep.
You should get back on with that. If you want to sing love, just look for Connor and Sal.
Yeah. You may like Sally and myself.
Yes.
And of course, there's also a karaoke night as well up there. Despite all the loud noise, thankfully I managed to walk outside just to manage to avoid having my ears blocked. And also because of that, thankfully, myself, as well as my girlfriend Sally and my brother Guy, managed to sing along to a lot of famous songs. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. After the break, the Knights head off to the John Hunter Hospital and we have a look at the sporting highlights from 2001.
We want to see your dreams come true, and the reason that we're here today is just because of you. This is our town, it's here that we're born and bred. We've been through the rough times, been through the tough times, know about the good times ahead. We know how to do it your way, build it up in your own hometown, make it grow with the people you know, people who won't let you down. You know where you're going, and we wanna go with you. Wanna keep it growing.
the best way to start your day.
Call M&H Air, your local Dakin air conditioning experts for sales, installation and service on all Dakin split system and ducted air conditioning. Call 1-800 444 911 for service.
Welcome back. Jackson Hastings wants to make the Knights premiership contenders and help teammates achieve individual success. The new signing is also keen to give back to supporters, and that started today at the John Hunter Children's Hospital.
The Knights rubbing shoulders with the real heroes, nurses, and some very brave kids.
To be able to come in here and to put a smile on a kid's face or even an adult's face and, share that Christmas spirit and let them know that everything's going to be okay is it's really humbling, mate.
Jacob Saifiti reunited with his little mate Riley, who's battling leukemia. The players all bringing Christmas cheer, including new recruit Jackson Hastings.
I feel like I've been here for a couple of years now already. I've only been here about 4 weeks, but just trying to find my groove, settle in and just give everything I can to the club and the fans and the people that love this place.
Also on the mend from a broken leg, the halfback is fully training and kicking again.
I've got a little bit of bandage on it now. It's just to keep the swelling down. It's just what happens when you have an operation and you're old and slow like me. They look after you. So, it's come along really well. I've no doubts for any games and can't wait to play some footy.
His goal, taking Newcastle to the finals.
The average Joe looking from the outside in would probably laugh at that or scoff at that, but we get it right and keep everyone on the park. So the goal is to win and hopefully we get a few individual accolades along the way.
Now to classic flashbacks now, and of course let's go up to the year 2001. And of course let's go to April that year, where the Knights SG Ball Cup side was still celebrating after their victorious win up in the grand final. Because of that, we managed to quickly celebrate with them after that. So, here's a preview. Newcastle United had everyone straight on their feet. Because of that, they still managed to have a win. Also, it was just right up at a home match at the Malafon Stadium. And of course, the goals kept on coming. Meanwhile, United has named an unchanged lineup as part of their upcoming clash. That includes Caitlin, Zamp, Zorokic, Spod, Dodd, Tescanis, Mansley, Wazowick, Trukevsky, McBreen, Swanacott, as well as Janoweski, as well as Ferguson, Raffel, Fleming and Johnson. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Both Newcastle City and Terrigal Avoca had a game right up in the Black Diamond AFL over the weekend, and it was of course it was part of the 2001 season, as both teams kicked goals. It was just a massive and marvellous one. Terrigal Avoca managed to kick a lot of goals with a good surprise. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Knights player Darren Albert was up at the John Hunter Hospital today, and of course he had the Easter Bunny with him. Albert's still sore due to a injured leg. Of course, thankfully, had the kids right throughout with him. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Western Suburbs took on Wildtown Mayfield right up in the Newcastle Rugby League. Wildtown Mayfield scored first, before Western Suburbs struck back. And of course it didn't stop there. For West, they scored. Then Wildtown Mayfield scored and kept on doing it. Then Wildtown Mayfield won the game. Also, Maytime in the ladder, Lakes United are in the lead on 12 points, while Wildtown Mayfield and Western Suburbs are both tied for both second and third. Meantime, the Northern Blues are in fourth and are on 8 points. So too is Cessnock, who are in fifth, while Curry is still on the same number, 8th, but they've been knocked out of the ladder. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. It was right in the most recent round of the NBN Soccer League as part of the 2001 season. Also, two teams quickly had to score goals. And also, it's not the Newcastle Jets. No, it's of course two local clubs that had to score. But of course, one had to kick a goal and secure the match winner. And of course, there was still a battle to come. And of course, Edgeworth was still on a good go. Then, they ended up securing the match winner. Then, East Maitland had a yellow card. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Go-kart racing occurred up in Newcastle over the weekend. But however, there was a crash between two of them, which led to one of the drivers, and also a massive crash occurred, which led to some of the drivers being taken to the John Hunter Hospital. And because of that, the race had to be called off. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. The cars were driving, of course, in spectacular form up in Newcastle over the weekend. Because of that, it was just marvellous. But then, crashes came above. But then, a lot of them came above. And also, local drivers also became involved. Conklin McLeod, NBN News.
And Robinson just needs to finish in this top bracket. John Pine wins, Ron Pine second. David, congratulations, buddy. We said earlier, and all the folks now know that it's been a pretty tough week for you. You haven't been well. That glandular fever attack. You've had a...
There are plenty of incredible games up in the New England Northwest as part of their local rugby league and rugby union matches. Of course, there are a lot of teams from Tamworth, Guida, as well as from Moree, and also Gunnedah. And of course, tries were scored, but thankfully, but only a few teams had to be match winners. And also, the winning match was of course starting to work. But despite a few tackles, comebacks started to fall just short. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Lee Sterry knows exactly a lot about the Breakers. Thankfully, the Breakers were on a good roll right up in Sydney last night. But of course, the Breakers didn't. But thankfully, the Breakers refused to fail on everything. But thankfully, Newcastle United failed. But thankfully, Newcastle United did not want to fail in the game, winning the match against Sydney 2-0. And of course, Newcastle United has named their lineup to take on Makani FC, which starts in about a week. Meanwhile, Massey has been omitted from the game, while the likes of Kalen, Zorikig, Spod, Wilson, as well as Harper, Roberts, McManus, Dodd, Mansley, and Swancott have been named. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. It was a match of Newcastle Rugby League that turned very ugly and nasty. Players from both Cessnock and Curry had players sent to the bin for violence. And because of that, those two players will miss the upcoming clash. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. The Newcastle North Stars really new to the Australian Ice Hockey League, and of course the club had their first win of the 2001 season, beating their rivals with a huge 3-2 win up at the Hunter Ice Skating Stadium at Warners Bay. And of course it was in front of a home crowd. Also, it was marvellous for the ride up in Newcastle District Cricket, with the grand final becoming huge and popular. and of course, won by Charlestown. Meantime, it's round six of the Newcastle Rugby League, and Lakes United are up against the Macquarie Scorpions, while the Cessnock Goannas are up against the Curry Bulldogs. Maitland is up against Central, while Waratah is up against Souths. While on Sunday, the Northern Blues are up against Western Suburbs, and Raymond Terrace have the bye. And also, what's happening is, of course, round 2 of the Newcastle and Hunter Rugby Union, with the University of Newcastle taking on the Waratahs, while Mayweather Carlton is up against Maitland. The Hamilton Hawks are up against Eastern Districts, while Nelson Bay is up against Singleton. Congal and McLeod, NBN News. They're known for making a lot of loud noise, but a lot of monster trucks stopped by Terrigal on the Central Coast overnight. Because of that, despite that, there were a few crashes, as well as a lot of burnouts. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. The Breakers had Newcastle United had a match that, of course, had the words "never to die for." And of course, when Newcastle United scored, it was just spectacular. Still having the same colours under their former name, the Breakers. Meantime, in the Black Diamond AFL, there were wins to Terrigal Avoca, Newcastle City and Cardiff. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Josh Perry was really lucky to be back. And of course, thankfully, he made the Knights have a historic. Thankfully, the Knights had a historic comeback, and also it was a win over the Brisbane Broncos. Something that the Knights never had to go out for. It was a huge result right up in the Newcastle Rugby League, with Cessnock defeating Curry. And of course, the match became known for a couple of incidents, for which both Curry and Cessnock were involved in a violent brawl. And of course, a lot of punch-ups, also a lot of punches were thrown. And also both teams had players sent to the bin, while Curry had a player in hospital. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Racing returned to Newcastle today, and of course, thankfully, they all had to duck for cover, but however, a building was alight on fire. But thankfully, one of the cars had to quickly drive past it. And of course, it was all back from Raymond Terrace. But thankfully, nobody was injured. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Now it's time for the word from the Chief himself, Paul Harrigan. Both City versus Country coming back after a couple of years off. It's also a winning one. with the match heading to the Central West. Also, plenty of matches occurred. Also, with the Knights having a win over Penrith. But of course, despite that, Newcastle secured a win. And of course, the Chief has got his tips for round 9 of the National Rugby League. He's tipped the Storm to beat the Eagles, the Broncos to annihilate the Roosters, the Bulldogs to annihilate the Tigers, and also the Dragons to beat the Eels, the Raiders to beat the Cowboys, as well as the Knights to beat the Sharks, as well as the Warriors to beat the Panthers. The Knights had one more training session ahead of their clash with the Canberra Raiders, who had just managed to quickly secure a win over the West Tigers. But the Knights, of course, have to quickly watch out for Mal Meninga's team, right up in the nation's capital. And of course, there's only one thing the Knights have to do: get the job right, and also keep their season and finals hopes alive. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Newcastle United had a good start, but then things started to go from a little bit bad, but then things started to turn good. But then one of United's players was pushed, finishing with a draw. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Both Western Suburbs and the Northern Blues had a game, and of course it was up in the Newcastle Rugby League competition for 2001. First, Western Suburbs scored plenty of tries. Then the Northern Blues, which of course consists of former Newcastle Knights player Leo Denver, also scored. Also, the Rosellas managing to run with the ball, scoring more tries. So too did Nelson Bay. So too did the Northern Blues. But West eventually won the game. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Horse racing at Newcastle Jockey Club, of course, never stops anyone. And also it doesn't stop up at Newcastle Harness Racing Club as well. Also, all the action takes place on Friday. And of course, the punters always tip their favourite horses to win. Also, in the Newcastle Rugby League, one of Curry's best players will miss the next couple of matches following this incident. And so too will one of Cessnock's players, follows this punch-up, which landed one of Curry's players in hospital. And of course, Curry has since been sued by Cessnock themselves. Conklin McLeod at NBN News. Good news for the Knights. And of course, they came right back in the second half, just to make sure that they were not going to leave without a win after their huge 2-point win over the Canberra Raiders up at Bruce Stadium. And that, of course, made Coach Michael Hagan happy. And of course, Newcastle has named their squad to play against the Sharks. That includes Mark Hughes, Darren Albert, Tamana Tahu, Adam McDougall, as well as Justin Ryder, Sean Rudder, Andrew Johns, Josh Perry, Danny Badilis, Matt Parsons, and also Steve Simpson, Ben Kennedy, and Billy Peden, while Marquette, Bailey, Fletcher, and Grief are all on the bench. And of course, the Knights managed to have a fight back, thankfully, against the Raiders. Because of that, Newcastle is up at home this weekend where they'll face Cronulla and are hoping to beat them. And of course, because of that, the Knights are hoping to quickly end Cronulla's undefeated winning run. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Training officially came for the Knights as part of their clash against the Cronulla Sharks. And of course, because of that, the Knights started training right up at Mayfield this morning. And of course, one of those training was of course Adam McDougall, who of course, thankfully, was not injured. And of course, the Knights have a game which of course starts this weekend. They'll take on Cronulla on Sunday. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Now, here are the tips from the Chief himself, Paul Harrigan.
Right, we'll come and get changed for Christmas. Come and get changed, otherwise I'm not getting you too fat.
A few games occurred over the weekend, and of course the Raiders managed to down the Panthers with a huge win. And that, of course, was during last year's finals. But meanwhile, Parramatta, as well as Brisbane, managed to down their rivals. And of course, also the Eels managed to take down the Dragons this week. Also, the Warriors managed to secure a win at home, but this time against the Panthers. It was all during both the first and second half. Meanwhile, the Chief has all but done his tips for round 10 of the NRL. And of course, because of that, he's chosen the Eels to beat the Bulldogs, the Panthers to beat the Raiders, the Broncos, Sharks and Storm to beat the Dragons, Warriors and Roosters. Also, the Knights to smash the Tigers and the Cowboys to crush the Eagles. It was really wet up at Marathon Stadium, but thankfully everyone didn't care. As Newcastle United had a marvellous one. But despite the club not going through to the finals, it was of course an end to the club. Now they'll have to wait for next season. Despite the fireworks going off. Now, next season is what Newcastle United will have to wait for. If plans of going through to the finals are underway. Congley and McLeod, NBN News. The Golden Slipper. It's something that one of our fellow Novocastrians has always wanted for a very long time. And of course, that drought is about to end tomorrow. When horse racing kicks off. While we were walking up at the Hunter Valley Gardens, and of course, there were real life horses over there. And of course, it was just spectacular. The beloved Novocastrian is hoping to quickly win a title for the very first time. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Still shirtless after their victory over the Raiders, Ben Kennedy has always had a good time to smile, and of course, Ben Kennedy managed to score a try just above in the dying few minutes of the game. But thankfully, Andrew Johns was not going anywhere, and of course, he managed to take a bit of time out. And of course, Joey managed to score a try as well. And of course, so too did Tamano Tahu. And of course, thankfully, Adam McDougall was watching on as well. As the one who, of course, and so too was Matthew Gidley. And of course, the Knights managed to win 22-20. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Michael Hagan, of course, was sitting at home alone, watching the Knights as they ended up beating Cronulla on Sunday with a huge win up at Marathon Stadium. And of course, Newcastle managed to secure the match winner. It was all thanks to Andrew Johns doing a banana kick and also Billy Peden scoring the match-winning try. But of course, the Knights had plenty of chances to quickly secure a victorious win. And of course, the Knights have a couple of matches yet before the State of Origin starts in May. And also, City vs Country is back next month. Conglin McLeod, NBN News. The last time both Cardiff and Terrigal Avoca met It was, of course, in last year's Black Diamond AFL Grand Final. But of course, round one of the 2001 Black Diamond AFL season starts off with Cardiff hosting Terrigal of Ochre. And of course, Newcastle City is up against West Newcastle Wallsend, while Killarney Vale hosts Nelson Bay. Also, Gosford is up against Warners Bay. And also in the NBN Soccer League, Highfields are up against Western, Adamstown is up against South Cardiff, while Hamilton is up against Broadmeadow, West Wallsend is up against Edgeworth, and Cessnock is up against Maitland. While in the Newcastle and Hunter Rugby Union, the Wanderers are up against the Waratahs, Eastern Districts are up against Nelson Bay, Singleton are up against Maitland, while it's the two rivals, Merweather Carlton, playing against the Hamilton Hawks. And in round 8 of the Newcastle Rugby League competition, Maitland is up against Macquarie, while Raymond Terrace is up against Curry Curry. Also, Cessnock is up against South, while Waratah Mayfield is up against the Northern Blues, and Lakes United is up against Western Suburbs. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. It was a much better one for the Socceroos. Following their win, it was just a spectacular success. And of course, thankfully, it was a dream come true for the Socceroos, beating their rivals with a huge victory, straight on their hands. Now, there's only one more thing left to do. That, of course, World Cup glory. And of course, they'll qualify for that next year. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Touching down in Newcastle this morning were, of course, these go-kart races. Because of that, they knew a lot about driving as well. Now, of course, they've got no signs of slowing down as well. And also, the only thing that they've got to do is to quickly have a good drive. Just to make sure that there's no crashes going on. Also, it wraps up on Sunday. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Newcastle United have got a lot of players right in front of their own line, but their coach has since got a good opportunity, and of course a win needs to get them into the playoffs. And of course, United have named an unchanged lineup. And of course, from Caitlin to McBreen, Johnson, Roberts to McManus, as well as Dodd, Harper to Swancott. Also, Newcastle managed to quickly have a good go by piling on the points earlier. And of course, they certainly did by securing a win. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Banned from playing Newcastle Rugby League for a few weeks, the two rugby league players from both Cessnock and Curry were involved in a violent punch-up that occurred right during the match. And that, of course, forced one of the players to be taken to hospital. Meantime, round 7 of the Newcastle competition kicks off tonight, with Macquarie up against Cessnock, Curry is up against Maitland, while Souths is up against Lakes United, and West is up against Waratah. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. It was a good amount of training, and the Knights certainly had to have a lot of good training as part of their clash with the Tigers this weekend. And it's something that, and of course, a win is what Newcastle certainly needs. Running straight at Mayfield, it's what the Knights had to do. And of course, Andrew Johns will not miss the game tomorrow. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Up against Fiji, the Socceroos were, of course, securing one of the best results. It was 1-0 first. Then the Socceroos managed to quickly secure a massive win, 2-0. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Go-kart racing attracted many more locals across Newcastle and the Hunter today. And of course, despite the crashes, and of course, despite the slidings, and of course, many managed to win races. And of course, as well as competing against each other. But also, despite the smoke coming off, but thankfully, no fires came above. But also, despite the disasters, it also became the best of the best. But however, thankfully, no injuries. And of course, just as they always say, winners are grinners. But however, one of them wasn't forced to leave the field due to engine problems. And of course, despite finishing first, thankfully picked up his first ever medal. And of course, so too did the other drivers. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Bikes can be huge, and so too could and of course, so too could car racing as well. And of course, it's why the Hunters' Casey Stoner is joining the British Grand Prix. But however, down under, back in Australia, thankfully, one of the drivers managed to walk away following this incident. And of course, the late Peter Block arrived. The World Rally Championships continue until Sunday. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. The Northern Blues were up against Waratah Mayfield in the Newcastle Rugby League competition today. Both teams knew exactly what to do, and of course, score tries Walter Mayfield scored. Then kicked goals after that. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Still swimming and still celebrating after beating the West Tigers, the Knights of course knew exactly what to do, hammer their rivals up at Marathon Stadium, and of course Andrew Joey Johns knew exactly a lot about it. And of course, he was on the field, as well as Ben Kennedy. The Knights led right throughout the entire match, scoring plenty of tries at home. And of course, thankfully, they didn't look back. However, Matthew Gidley was also there as well. And of course, the plan is Origin selection, which of course starts next week. And of course, Adam McDougall also scored. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Newcastle United knows what it's like to be a soccer team. But of course, in the National Soccer League, they've since become huge. But the huge ones have since become one of the all-time favourites. Also, United have changed their lineup. They've added both Dodd and McBreen back. And also, they've got Caitlin, Wilson, Sprod, Macy, Harper, Johnson and Swancott as well. So too does Roberts and McManus. And of course, their dreams is to go through to the finals of this year's National Soccer League, which of course everyone hopes will work. But if not, it'll be next season. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. The go-karts were back in Newcastle. And because of that, plenty of local drivers were quickly attracting everyone's attention. And of course, it was due to their racing skills. And of course, there were no crashes, thankfully. Of course, everyone knew what to do. It was, of course, to stay calm. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Training arrived early for the Knights today up at Marathon Stadium as part of their upcoming clash. But of course, they must have a game to win tomorrow. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Gliders as well as Tamworth's sides in the New England Rugby Union competitions were still going strong. So too were their rugby league counterparts. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. There was lots of training for the Knights this morning. It was part of their upcoming game against the Roosters. While Andrew Johns was training, and of course so too were the others. And of course with State of Origin at about a month away. But of course, Tamana Tahu and Robbie O'Davis also trained on. And of course, Coach Michael Hagan is hoping that a win can, of course, become the best. Conglin McLeod, NBN News. It was a marvellous win for the Knights as they managed to take on the Roosters at an away game. It was all thanks to Stephen Crow. But of course, the Knights managed to unveil their new shirt up at the store overnight. But of course, Crow unveiled his true Knights colours just in time, and of course, it was just a massive one for everyone as well. And of course, Andrew Johns ran up the ball and started kicking it. And of course, the Knights have a home game this week. Conglin McLeod, NBN News. The Hunter may have got a lot of motorcycle racing champs, but it's also got an event that's on up there. But also bike racing came down to to one of the most death-defying stunts up there, which is one that you shouldn't do at all. Thankfully, one of course was up in Newcastle today to quickly support the red and blue. Conglin McLeod, NBN News. Players from the Newcastle United and Knights know exactly the same what it's like to wear the signature red and blue colours onto their shirts. And it follows the Knights' win over Cronulla right up at Malphone Stadium. Thankfully, the Knights had a large shirt which was underway up at Stockland Jesmond over the weekend. And of course, plenty of Knights fans had to sign it. But meanwhile, the Knights players themselves were up at training, right up at Mayfield. And also, it was part of a home game, which starts this weekend. Conglin McLeod, NBN News. Two teams, of course, up in the NSL, and of course, it was a combination of aggressive and hatred between each other. But of course, Newcastle United were training up at Broadmeadow today. It was all but part of their plans to go through to the playoffs or the finals, as it's called. And of course, United have since got an unchanged lineup, and of course, they have a home game to play. Also, because of that, they're hoping to go through. Conglin McLeod, NBN News. Both rugby league and union up in the New England and Northwest can be a bit tough for many, but also hard. when a lot of teams win. But in rugby league, there's the Group 4 and Group 19 competitions. But also there's the New England Rugby Union teams. But when one of those teams secures a win, they of course have their finals hopes alive. Congley McLeod, NBN News. After beating the Cronulla Sharks up at the Marathon Stadium last weekend, it's now time for the Knights to take on the West Tigers in round 10 of the competition. Because of that, it's going to be a really tough one indeed for the Knights. And of course, the Knights will need to do it really quickly indeed. And of course, Michael Hagan knows exactly what to do. And of course, Hagues has named an unchanged lineup as part of the clash. And of course, Hagues has changed his lineup as part of the clash against the West Tigers. That includes Robbie O'Davis and also Ryder, Tamana Tohu, Mark Hughes, Adam McDougall, Sean Rudder, Andrew Johns, and also there's Grief, who's moved, and also there's Danny Badiris, Matt Parsons, Steve Simpson, Ben Kennedy, and Billy Peden, while Marquette, Bailey, and also Matthew Gidley is on the bench, and also Abraham is on the bench as well. And of course, there's only one thing that Newcastle needs to do. Right before the State of Origin competition starts, is to annihilate or crush the West Tigers this weekend. And of course, it follows last week's win over the Cronulla Sharks. Congley McLeod, NBN News. Last week's win over the Cronulla Sharks was just one of the best for the Newcastle Knights, and of course they keep their top 8 hopes and hopes and finals hopes and also lines alive, and also they're the favourites to take out this year's NRL Grand Final. Congley McLeod, NBN News. Another round of Newcastle Rugby League certainly comes into an idea. And of course, it was right up between two clubs. Then a massive punch-up came, and of course West had a player sent off, and of course sent to the bin before Walter Mayfield scored one of the best, and also continued on scoring. Then it all happened again, as both teams have been considered as rivals right throughout the entire game. Then Waratah continued on scoring. Now to the ladder, and of course in the Newcastle competition, and Lakes United are in the lead, and West are in second, while Waratah Mayfield are in third, while the Northern Blues are in fourth, and Cessnock are in fifth. And of course, despite also on 8 points, Curry are in sixth. Congley McLeod, NBN News. Speaking of soccer, if there's one amount of soccer that you need to see, it's of course the NBN Soccer League. And of course, it was another round that kicked off this week. And of course, South Cardiff took on their rivals, Hamilton. And of course, it was just a massive round. Of a successful one indeed. And of course, it was just one of the best. Congley McLeod, NBN News. In the past couple of months, it's been a do or die match, but however, these boxers from Newcastle and the Hunter have been doing a lot of good things well. As part of an upcoming fight, which starts at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre this week. And of course, the fight starts this week. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Thousands of women across Newcastle and the Hunter managed to quickly have a protest today to stop domestic violence in their region. And because of that, they just really want to see it go for good. These adorable teenage girls have been victims of domestic violence in the past, but however, their teachers are saying that domestic violence needs to go, and also the students all agree. Congley McLeod, NBN News. Newcastle United had a season that was well known forgotten, and of course Newcastle United is what became the new name back in 2000. And of course, the team has had a fair bit of struggles, but also a lot of players. Meanwhile, United is named an unchanged lineup as part of their next game, and also they've got Caitlin Sprod meanwhile they've got Caitlin Zolkig and also Sprod as captain, while Wilson, Trepzewski, Harper, as well as Bonavoglia, McBreen, Roberts, McManus and Dodd are also there, while Johnson, Maisie, Wicks and Swancott are all on the reserves. And of course, United coach Lee Sterry is hoping that a win will of course get Newcastle back onto the good books. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. It was an emotional one right up in Newcastle and the Hunter today as part of Anzac Day. And also there were locals right across from the Hunters' army to Newcastle's army, as well as Lake Macquarie's ones as well. And also the Governor General turned up as well. Also the Newcastle Beach did as well. So too did the Lighthouse. As well as some adoring Knights fans who also arrived. Of course, it was to mark an emotional Anzac Day tribute in Newcastle, and also what it's like to become a Novocastrian. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Newcastle Rugby League, Newcastle Rugby Union had a wonderful game over the weekend. But of course, Merewether Carlton had a win. But however, it was the girls who quickly had a quick turn, as Newcastle secured the win. In April every year, and of course back in 2001, it's always an emotional time and also a tough time. And also, it's that time when Anzac Day is on. And also, it's when dozens of Novocastrians, as well as the hunters, as well as everyone from the Hunter, gather around to celebrate the lives of many who we lost back in the 40s. And of course, General Peter Cosgrove arrived. And of course, dozens of Novocastrians arrived. The young, old and new, but also some adorable Newcastle Knights fans also arrived. Also, our soldiers quickly turned up with an emotional walk to say goodbye. Conglin McLeod, NBN News. It was a massive time right up in the representative rugby league competition, and of course Northern were up against their rivals. Thankfully, Northern fought back. And of course, Northern consists of players from the Newcastle Rugby League players. They had to beat their rivals earlier today. And of course, Newcastle's representative team has been named, with Saunders from the Cessnock Goannas named, while Hall from Lakes United has been named as well, while Leo Denver and Whitten, who are from the Northern Blues, named as well, while Cook from the Western Suburbs Rosellas has been named, and Griffiths from Wildshire Mayfield named, and also Wise from the Cessnock Goannas named as well. While there's more good news, McNabb from Wildshire Mayfield has been named, while Lawton from the Northern Blues has been chosen. Also, Miles and Jeffries from Lakes United has been chosen, while Coxon and Grogan from Raymond Terrace has been chosen, while Madison and Watson from Western Suburbs have been chosen, and Taylor has been chosen for Wildshire Mayfield. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. It was a match between the Cessnock Goannas and the Western Suburbs Magpies up in the Newcastle Rugby League competition today. And because of that, both clubs didn't want to stop scoring or getting denied. And of course, Cessnock managed to score next, then Western Suburbs after that scored. Cessnock managed to score after that. Then the Rosellas scored. And of course, it became enough for the Rosellas to secure a win. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. The Knights were in the lead earlier against St George Illawarra. Because of that, that lead never stopped. And because of that, the Knights had a lot of good experiences and it all came true. With the Knights securing a 32-point win. The Knights are now back at home next week at the Marathon Stadium. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Western Suburbs, as well as the Maitland Pumpkin Pickers, were playing against each other up in the Newcastle Rugby League. And of course, West scored. Then Maitland had the point earlier. But however, it was dropped dead. Then Western Suburbs continued on scoring and won the game. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Still celebrating after their win, the Knights SG Ball Cup side had a good amount of rights to celebrate. Following their incredible grand final win in the SG Ball Cup Grand Final. And of course, there was also a dinner that had to be quickly on in Newcastle. And of course, their players certainly hungry. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Robbie O'Davis was busy signing autographs. And because of it, he was also busy doing something else. And so too was coach Michael Hagan. And of course, the Knights have a changed lineup ahead of their clash. And of course, Mark Hughes is at number 1, while Tamana Tahu fills in for the injured Darren Albert. And of course, Matthew Gidley is just on at number 3, while Adam McDougall and Justin Ryder are back. And of course, Sean Rudder is at number 6, while Andrew Johns is captain. And of course, Grief is at number 8, and Danny Badiris is at number 9, while Parsons, Simpson, Kennedy, and Peden are all at numbers 10, 11, 12, and 13. Meantime, Marquette, Bailey, and O'Brien are of course all on the bench, joining O'Davis and Albert, who are also on the bench. And of course, Matthew Gidley took a bit of time off to quickly sign autographs as well as part of the upcoming game, for which the Knights must win. The game kicks off this weekend. Something that every Knights fan cannot wait. It's also before the State of Origin series kicks off at about a month's time. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. There was lots of danger going on for the Knights. They were in a whole lot of trouble earlier when the Dragons, of course, were up in Newcastle. After the Dragons have annihilated North Queensland. But of course, Andrew Johns is hoping to break one of the Dragons' world records. That, of course, is at a game tomorrow. And of course, still on training, and both clubs have got a lot of good expectations. And of course, with St George Illawarra going down to the Brisbane Broncos, who were last year's premiers. And of course, the Knights are hoping to beat the Dragons tomorrow. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. It was a sea of red and blue for Newcastle United. And of course, they'll be renamed as just the Newcastle Jets next season. And of course, United were the first to score. Meantime, the players off contract with Newcastle United are, of course, Caitlin, Harper, McManus, Mansley, Sprout, Zolokic, Dodd, McBreed, McNacker, as well as Rafu and Trpzewski. And of course, these players have to extend their contracts immediately. Just in time for next season, for which everyone will hope will be the Jets' year. And of course, Newcastle United is hoping to quickly have a good go. And of course, the Westpac rescue helicopter made its way into the John Hunter Hospital earlier this morning. And of course, they had to fly all the way up there just to make sure that no one was of course seriously hurt or injured. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Boxing is usually a sport that the boys play, but it's also a sport that the girls can play as well. It all happened in Newcastle today. And of course, thankfully, one of the women had to be crowned victorious. As well as being influenced by a lot of karate chopping. And of course, plenty of Novocastrians had to have a bit of a fight going on. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. There's only one thing that all of us cannot deny about Andrew Johns. And of course, good news. He had a good read at the Newcastle Herald this morning. And because of that, he knew about his former teammate Brett Morley feeling the axe. And of course, because of it, Johns has been named for New South Wales' State of Origin squad ahead of the first 3 games. And also, he's hoping that New South Wales will win the series 3-0 again next month. Joey is currently recovering from a leg injury for which he suffered during Newcastle's win over the Dragons over the weekend. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. Okay, now it's time for the tips with the Chief himself, Paul Harrigan. And of course, there's only one good thing. And of course, can New South Wales win the State of Origin again? But of course, with New South Wales winning last year's season 3-0, it was huge. And of course, the Blues have been having a lot of training sessions this week. Also, the Blues managed to quickly secure a win. It was all thanks to Brad Fittler scoring the match-winning try. And of course, with the Origin kicking off this weekend, it's huge.
The Newcastle Knights trained a lot up at Marathon Stadium this morning as part of a game. They trained a whole lot until it was time to stop. Meanwhile, round 10 of Newcastle Rugby League kicks off on Saturday between Maitland and West, followed by then Raymond Terrace is up against South Newcastle and Lakes United are up against Warrata Mayfield, while round 5 of the Newcastle and Hunter Rugby Union starts on Saturday, with Singleton up against Eastern Districts, then Maitland is up against the Warratas, while Meriwether Carlton is up against the Two Blues. The Hamilton Hawks are up against the University of Newcastle.
On Tuesday, the Two Blues and the Warratas will have a game against each other.
And in round 4 of the NBN Soccer League, which starts this Saturday, Hamilton are up against South Cardiff. While on Sunday, the game between West Wallsend and Adamstown is the match of the round, while Cessnock, Highfields and Weston are all at home.
Plenty of Maritime Union workers across Newcastle and the Hunter walked off the job today as part of a massive protest. And also, the words, of course, remain hands off. Also, it's part of a protest due to Prime Minister John Howard arriving in Newcastle in May. Congley McLeod, NBN News. A fair bit of time off today was, of course, from the Newcastle Knights, and of course, with their first grade side managing to quickly keep their finals hopes and chances alive. They're also the best side to win this year's premiership, after securing plenty of wins over the past many months. And of course, Darren Albert believes that he can quickly stay with the Knights for yet another 3 seasons. And of course, so too does Mark Hughes. And of course, Newcastle has a home game tonight. Congley McLeod, NBN News. Okay, now it's time for the word from the Chief himself, Paul Harrigan. And of course, the Knights managed to outclass the Tigers with a huge win and defeat the Raiders. And of course, with the Knights still in the top 8, it's still becoming a huge success. With the Knights managing to secure a 2-point victory in the final few seconds. Meanwhile, it's also becoming huge for work right up in the Newcastle rugby competition. And of course, the Chief has chosen his teams for round 11. And of course, he's chosen Brisbane to beat He's chosen the Brisbane Broncos to beat the Sharks. He's chosen the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs to beat North Queensland, and also the Northern Eagles to beat Canberra, and also the Newcastle Knights to beat St George Illawarra, or the Melbourne Storm to beat Penrith, as well as the Sydney Roosters to defeat the Warriors, and the Parramatta Eels to defeat the West Tigers. Australia's women were quickly awarded right up at Newcastle over the weekend. They picked up silver, and of course it was part of a spectacular season, while their rivals lost. And of course, with tennis still on the good rounds, it's also becoming the good favourites in honour, with their plans to become the best. Meanwhile, it's a local sport, and round 9 of the Newcastle Rugby League kicks off on Saturday with South Newcastle up against Maitland, while Curry is up against Central, while on Sunday the Macquarie Scorpions are up against Raymond Terrace, Western Suburbs are up against Western Suburbs are up against the Cessnock Goannas, and the Northern Blues are up against Lakes United. Meantime, in round 4 of the Newcastle and Hunter Rugby Union competition, the Waratahs are up against Singleton, while the University of Newcastle is up against Meriwether Carlton, Maitland is up against Nelson Bay, and the Wanderers are hoping to give Hamilton a huge flogging. And in round 10, in the NBN Soccer League, which starts tonight, it's Edgeworth versus Cessnock. While on Saturday, it's Broadmeadow versus West Wallsend. While on Sunday, Maitland, South Cardiff and Adamstown all have home games against the Highfields, Western and Hamilton Olympic. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. It was another round of Newcastle Rugby League, and because of that, South Newcastle scored first, before the Maitland Pumpkin Pickers scored back. Then the old things happened again. And of course, South Newcastle secured a fight back. And of course, secured the match winner. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. The Northern Eagles know what it's like to win or lose at a home game. And of course, they were up against the Canberra Raiders at the time. But our the Northern Eagles, who represent both the Central Coast and Manly Warringah, were forced to have a joint venture last year. Also, Jeff Tuvey reveals why. Thankfully, the Northern Eagles managed to win right up in Gosford. even though the Raiders fought back. But thankfully, the Northern Eagles were on their good spirit, as the Northern Eagles won the game. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. It's a heartbreaking experience for Michael Hagan to see his players being forced to be carried off the field due to injury. That of course occurred during the Knights' win over St George Illawarra. And of course, not only was Andrew Johns hurt, but so were a few more. But thankfully, Newcastle was not going down without a fight. Despite that, the Knights, of course, managed to secure a huge victory. And of course, the Knights are back at home next week. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. It was just the best one of all. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. A good roll ahead for the Knights, but not without any drama. It was all because of injury. But despite that, the Knights managed to fight back right against St George Illawarra. And of course, thankfully, the Knights managed to win the game. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. There's a new instrumental shop, which is right next to Muso's Corner, up at 1 National Park Street at Newcastle. It's called The Drum Shop. And because of that, it's where this local quickly got his drum kit from. Also, he's been practicing on the drums for many years. Conklin McLeod, NBN News. After the break, we'll have a look at the sporting highlights from May 2001.
M&H Air, your local Dakin air conditioning experts for sales, installation and service on all Dakin split system and ducted air conditioning. Call 1-800 444 911 for service.
M&H Air. We want to see your dreams come true. And the reason that we're here today is just because of you. This is our town. It's here that we're born and bred. We've been through the rough times, been through the tough times, know about the good times ahead. We know how to do it your way. Build it up in your own hometown. Make it grow with the people you know. People who won't let you down. keep it growing, wanna keep it going, and we know where you're going to. Hey, this is our town. It's here that we're born and bred. Wanna see it growing, wanna see it going, wanna keep you moving ahead. This is our town. It belongs to you and me. And the Newcastle permanent is our society. Hey, this is our town. Hey, this is our town. Our town. Our town.
Come on, the big red ball from the bush to the bay. Yes, it's Lotto. Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. It's the big one you want. It's the game for you. 'Cause it's the big red ball that makes dreams come true. Dreams come true. Dreams come true. The big red ball. The big red ball. It's the big red ball that makes dreams come true.
Wake up in the morning, gotta get because the Herald is the best way to start your day.
We can't control the temperature outside, but inside, M&H Air keeps the temperature just right. M&H Air is your one-stop domestic and commercial air conditioning shop. M&H Air maintain what they install with their 24-hour at-call service division. Free call Dakin's #1 dealer, M&H Air. Local people offering exceptional service and secure your free quote today.
You feel so comfortable with us.
M&H Air, all year round living comfort.